Hi, I'm Carole Yu, an associate professor and chair of the psychology department at Covenant College, and this is IntroPsychSessions.
Welcome to IntroPsychSessions, Season 3. I'm your host, Garth Neufeld. In Season 2, I overhauled my Introductory Psychology class and chatted with a bunch of amazing teachers of psychology about the process. Then, some of you emailed me with questions or comments. So I invited you to take the intro psych discussion further. These are our conversations, and we hope you'll all enjoy Intro Psych Sessions Season 3. Well, Carole, thank you for doing this. And I was just rereading your email, and
my very weird email. I'm so sorry.
No, not at all. Not at all. It was so cool. I couldn't believe that people would just after that series. I don't ever get people. That's not true. I sometimes get people reaching out to me on a rare occasion from one of our flagship long form interviews for Psych Sessions. But the intro one seemed to really just wake people up. I was getting it in emails in my inbox almost weekly from somebody who was like, I just want to talk about intro psych with somebody. So, and that's
makes
you.
Me feel so much better.
Well, I'm glad. Sometimes talking into a microphone, even having a conversation, you're just wondering who is listening out there, and you were listening. So that's pretty cool. Can you just tell me a little bit about what is intro psych? Well, first of all, you're on sabbatical just like I am, right?
Well, it's ending. Yeah.
It's over. Yeah. It's so sad. But tell me, wherever you want to start, either just your interest in intro psych or what you're doing there at your institution. Maybe we can start there, and then we can talk a little bit about the series, and we'll just go wherever we want.
Okay. Yeah, right. That sounds great. No, I'm so glad you did that series. And I really was excited, especially when you started, because you were on sabbatical working on an intro psych project. And I was like, ooh, me too. Cool. That's so exciting. Other people do that. But yeah, I've been teaching at Covenant since 2014. And my focus there has really been on the lab in intro psych. And I kind of came into that, fortunately, kind of from two directions. When I got there, the person who was retiring had been teaching intro psych, and they did a rat lab with real rats, Skinner boxes and everything for the whole semester. And I didn't want to do that, but I did want to. I thought it was really important to give students that laboratory experience. And in grad school, I had TA'd for Danny Oppenheimer's intro psych class one time. And he does a lab where he has students design and run experiments during that time period. And so kind of putting those two things together, I was inspired to do that. And I've been just tweaking it every single semester since. So yeah, this semester or last spring when I was on sabbatical, my project was to kind of sit down and formalize a lab manual for intro psych, because I was reading a lot of the research on labs in an intro psych context. And I think it was a paper Chris Hockala was on. I probably should have looked up the exact citation before now, but finding that I think less than 10% of intro psych classes have that. And I totally get it, because resources are scarce and time is scarce and everything. But I thought one thing that might be helpful would be to have some sort of resource. So, if you are able to do a lab, what do you do and how might you want to structure that? So that's what I've been working on. I have it kind of set up with things I've done. I started out tying their lab exercise. So it's like a 2.5-hour lab period. We have Monday, Wednesday, Friday lecture, and then one day a week lab. I started out tying it more to the content we were doing that week. So do a memory lab when we were talking about memory, and stereotype or bias kind of lab when we're talking about social psych. And that was fine. But I wanted to dig more into kind of the methods underlying it, like intro psych initiative, the IPI pillar foundation of research methods. So I structured this more starting out, like how to find research and read it, and compare sources, and then they have an observational lab, an experimental, correlational, and then they kind of cap it off with psychological science for the public good kind of thing. And I want to do a bonus lab with archival research, but I haven't gotten there yet.
Okay. So this is cool. I know that listeners are probably going to have a couple questions that I have right now. So I'm going to ask them.
Great.
How big are your class? What are your class sizes?
Yeah, great question. I have about 30 students.
Okay.
One section a semester. And that's the only intro psych section.
Okay. And you are running labs every week during the term? Then?
Yes. I mean, we have like a week off, for fall break or.
Sure. But the students, I mean, being in the lab is part of the course, right?
Correct. It's a 4-credit course.
Okay.
I'm kind of working through, maybe this is the part I should edit out because I haven't proposed it yet. But I would like to shift to like a 3-credit lecture course and then a 1-credit lab that our majors are required to take. And everyone else is welcome to take. But I think that would help some of the disparity and like people coming in with AP credit or credit from elsewhere, but still really wanting them to get that lab experience before they start research methods.
Okay. So I did not have this intro psych experience when I was a student, and I have never run a lab before. So correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the experiences that you're giving students in a lab, a lot of us who don't have labs are trying to bring those active experiences into the classroom if we can, right?
Totally.
So, and do please correct me if I have a misconception about something, but why is the lab beneficial? And it sounds like, they're getting credit for it. So it's more time, right? But why is a lab beneficial compared to just integrating those experiences in a class?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I get that all the time from all sorts of people. So everybody.
From people who are funding it probably, right?
Yeah. And just students not understanding why they need it and everything, which is legitimate. I think that's really fair. I think the interactive class activities are great and are very useful. And I would not take that away from a lecture course. What I think this does is actually give students some of that experience in designing studies early and thinking through some of those questions that come up when you design a study. What are the confounds? And then they get experience, they run it on each other. So I also have it set up after much failure, that for the more involved ones, like the observational, experimental, correlational studies, where they will be using each other as human subjects or various people as human subjects. We talk about ethics in some detail, and they design it the first week, usually in a small group, like document their unique contributions. And then that way it gives me a chance to review what they've done before they actually run it. So otherwise it gets a little hectic, and then they run it and analyze the data. So at least in terms of what I was able to do in a lecture, it's more involved, more in depth, gives them a little bit more experience. And I guess with those goals of evaluate, design, conduct psychological research. And I do have the APA SLOs on each lab too.
Right.
In addition to my own, I think it's a really valuable experience, and students have fun with it.
And it's a devoted experience, right? Like students expect that they are going to be doing active laboratory research things when they're there. Mm-hmm. It's different than the class. So now, you've mentioned lecture a couple times. I am not anti-lecture. I think lecture can be done really well. Is the majority of your class time spent doing lecture then?
No, not really. I'm fine lecturing. I don't love it. Yeah. I get excited about it and I get carried away and probably talk more than I should, of course. But we still do like the little activities and, stuff in lecture. I just call it lecture because that's how our courses are set up. Also, psychology at our college is in the natural sciences division. So it kind of parallels some of those structures for the classes for bio and chem.
How did psychology come to be in the natural sciences division? That predate you?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's how they made it.
Yeah. Really interesting. Okay. So what else would people want to know about your lab? Like, okay. So you mentioned that you dug into the research on labs for intro psych. How helpful was that?
Really helpful. It was fascinating.
What did you learn?
I learned that it's not too common. I learned that some others have done it, but those papers are a little bit older. They're, I guess, 10 or so years old. But they were really helpful in describing the different ways people had set it up, because at the very beginning, I was kind of going back and forth on, should I set this up as like connected to more of a gen psych content or kind of more methodological? And so it was helpful to see how others had done it and why, and what some of their outcomes were. And that I do want to test this out more formally in my class, of course, because did the thing, I should find out if it works. So gave me some thoughts on how to evaluate that a little bit in the coming semester, using my students as guinea pigs.
So you went with the methodological route, right?
I did. I kind of went back and forth, but it made more sense.
Yeah. Well, I think that we're on the skills train now, right? Like that's where we're at with intro psych. And I love that your students are walking away with all of these skills, even if they don't become psych majors, right? Which most of them won't. So maybe talk to me about that. What is, I don't know if there's a critique that somebody might offer, like, do non-psych majors really need laboratory research experience? What do you think?
I think that's a very fair question. And some of my question for you is this, now that I've done it, was this a good idea? But I do think it's important because I tell them up front, even if you're not going to be a research scientist or a psychologist, you are going to have questions that research can answer, whether that's your questions, you just got a medical diagnosis and you want to figure out what that means, or you're a parent trying to figure out what you should do about your kid with whatever thing they're going through, or, you just read something on the news and you want to find out more. I think everyone faces those times when we don't know something that we would like to. So I'm hoping they walk away with some better skills on how to gather research data, what it actually means, and be able to compare what they think or what they want with what evidence says.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I don't have the luxury of having more time with my students to do that. And so I do have to pull it into my classes,
Absolutely.
In some ways, but also, I think you were talking about, do you have the SLOs in front of you right now? Because I don't, but no, you were talking about it. You were talking about design.
Yes.
What is that SLO? Do you have it right there?
Yes. Let's see. 2.2, evaluate, design, or conduct psychological research.
Yeah. That's really
I know there's an or.
Yeah. Well, that or was big when we were putting that together, when especially the team that put the SLOs together, there was a lot of discussion about that or, because it used to be, I think it used to be an and. I think if we look back to even, I don't know, maybe guidelines 2.0 for the undergraduate major, like that, maybe there's an outcome with an and in there. I'm sorry if I'm wrong, to whoever's listening, but the or, like one of the things that I hear, like for me, I definitely just have students dip their toes into the water of that outcome, whereas you have them swimming, because you have the time and it's important to you, right? Yeah, you push them in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's very cool. So on your sabbatical, did you rework this all, and have you actually have you kind of exposed your students to this next iteration of the lab?
I will, as of August 24th,
right.
Or 25th, I guess is when I see them. But yes, my original thought was to like have it as, like OER or something, just so it'd be useful. It's a little more challenging, and I make the mistake of every time I'm like, oh, I think it's done. Then I go back and like, I'll just read through it one more time, and it's not done. So, but I would like to I'm going to give this to my students, like just give it to them, obviously not make them pay anything for it. And we'll work through it this semester and see how it goes. And this, I also want to be clear, this is absolutely not a critique of people who don't do labs in their intro psych courses.
No. Like, I don't think anybody hears that. If they do, they're not being a very generous listener. So, but
as you said, it's important to me. So.
There's a million ways to do this course, isn't there? And then like, it's so exciting to hear somebody doing it in this sort of way, especially because it's so rare to do the lab. Now, let's see. What we still have a few minutes left. So, is there anything else? Oh, I had a question, which is when people hear this and they're like, oh, that's pretty cool, and I think I'd like to do that. Do you have a plan to get this out of the walls of your institution and to help people more broadly? I know that we have a very generous community when it comes to sharing things. I also know that you worked really, really hard on this. And so how do you feel about how your lab and your ideas work their way out of your institution?
I would love for them to work their way out of my institution. Yeah. Like I said, my original thought was to have it put on OER Commons, and I'm kind of looking into that. But I don't know if people look there for it.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants it and it's not there yet, let me know.
Yeah. I think there's, gosh, my podcast partner, Eric, is really good with this stuff. He just knows how to get things out in a way that, and, I don't know that there's, I don't know how, this should also serve you and the effort that you put into this. Right. So I know that we're very quick to share things. But also there are things do get published and things, are helpful to us as well, professionally, monetarily, whatever they can be. So anyway, I know Eric wouldn't mind if you ever reached out to him about that either. So he's got great ideas. Okay. So
thank you.
For sure. Yeah. So talk to me about I threw a few questions out to you and I said we could talk about them or not. Is there anything that you want to just chat about related to the course or about the series, the season 2, or about IPI in general?
I love that you did the series. I thought it was so fun to hear from so many different people.
Yeah.
I guess one thing that kind of stuck out to me in that was just kind of the different, there was such a theme of people kind of leaning into their own strengths or their own contexts. And like you said, there's a million ways to do this course, and there's a lot of really good ways to do this course. And I just loved hearing all the different ideas and that community of openness. I'm like, well, what if I tried this? And what if we did this? And that's way too much. Don't do that.
I got my hand slapped a few times. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I love that you had a spreadsheet, because I have one of those too, of topic, learning outcomes.
Yeah.
Pillars, all that stuff. So
yeah, because the content doesn't change, but it's almost like when you have that spreadsheet, you're looking at it, you're like, I think we would all look at a spreadsheet. First of all, the spreadsheet we make is going to look totally different because we're different people. But also when you look at it, you can see yourself in the way that you teach reflected in the way you organize that. It's funny. And well, let me ask you about this. The IPI outcomes, when you saw those and you're using those now, how did that change the way you approach the course, if at all?
Yeah, in some ways it was a little bit relieving. It's like, oh, good. I'm doing some of these things.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they're important to other people. So that was nice. last fall was the first time I'd used the final exam where I had like the integrative themes, I think were really helpful. Because I had tried something like that in my cognitive class. I'm talking through the themes and trying to connect them throughout the semester, but I had never really considered that with IntroPsych.
Yeah.
So that was really helpful. And they had a lot of fun with that assignment. They came up with some on their own. And then during the final exam period, they got in little small groups, talked about them and critiqued them, and then had an opportunity to revise what they had written. And it was so lively. It was so nice. And a couple of them commented like, this is so fun that they actually got to interact. So I really appreciate it.
Give me an example. Can you give me like, what exactly did you have them doing?
Yeah. So I think the assignment posted has the 7 themes, and it basically asks students to come up with a topic and an example within that content, within some area of the theme. So I had them do that. I had them come up with 2 examples for each theme, and I gave them a couple examples from different themes, and we talked through it in class. And then, so final exam period, we have like a 2-hour block for the final exam. So they were supposed to come with like a paper copy of their 2 examples from each theme, and they could come ask me about them obviously before that. And then during that time, they got in groups, or I put them in groups of 4, and they talked through their examples, and they were told to critique each other's and, jot down notes. And then they did that twice, like 2 rounds of small group discussions. And then at the end, they had some time to either update their own previous examples, and they had to add, I think I did, it's like a year ago now, so I don't remember, like 4 or 5 new examples that hadn't been any of their previous examples.
Yeah.
And then they turned in everything. They turned in their notes. They turned in all that stuff just so I could kind of see their thought process, partially because it was the first time I'd done it. And I was curious.
Yeah.
And again, a 30-person class, like I can do that. I understand.
Right.
People with 300-person classes.
Yeah. It's a little more challenging. You have to be a little more creative with it. But it sounds like you didn't really touch on the themes until that end. You kind of you had them apply everything that they had learned to this new kind of way of classifying the content. Is that right?
That is right. That might not have been the best idea, but
it's an idea. I mean, that's what I was doing for a while. I was just introducing. That's how I kind of waded in. I was introducing them at the end, and now with my overhaul, I'm introducing them as we go at different parts of the course. So, and not all at once because that's just overwhelming, I think, for students. But yeah, Carole, I'm just really glad that you reached out. Is there anything else that you want to share before we finish up, or anything else that you were thinking of?
Not in particular. If you have any strong ideas about labs and Gen Psych, I'm open to it. But
yeah,
do you feel like you got your intro psych course for the fall? Now that you've done all this?
I did a bunch of work on it early on, and then did the series, and then took a few months to just reflect on that. Went back and listened, started doing some more work. Now, like, it's time for me to pen kind of the final version. And I've got everything I need to do that now. It's just, I'm going to set a week aside this summer just to, finalize it. But it's been so nice. I think you'd agree. The sabbatical just allows you to think about this stuff and not feel like rushed. And, for me, I'm often going so fast that reflection's a problem for me, like slowing down and reflecting. And that's all that's what I've been able to do with my intro course. So I'm sure you also have had that experience, hey?
Yes. It's been really nice.
Well, Carole, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sitting down. Don't be a stranger. Reach out anytime. I love talking intro psych, and I'm sure everybody's going to love to hear about this idea, because it is, it's maybe not new, but it is rare. So, and the way that you're doing it sounds pretty cool. So thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Take care.